Welcome to Shambhu Sessions, a podcast of inspiring conversations with musicians, artists, and visionaries of our time. I'm your host, Shambhu, guitarist and composer, and my guest today is Andee Connors, Senior Manager of Catalog and Creator Services at Pandora. Andee's life in music spans record stores, underground music scenes, drumming, independent labels, and the streaming era. At Pandora, he and his team help artists, labels, and managers to understand how to use Pandora AMP to grow their audience and deepen their connection with listeners. He also serves as head of metal, punk, and new age programming. Before Pandora, Andee was a central force behind Aquarius Records, a beloved indie record store in San Francisco. He also ran Tumult, an indie label that helped elevate experimental music. Today, Andee remains an active musician, playing in several groups, including P.E.E., the San Francisco math rock band that has been enjoying a resurgence. Andee has lived music from the inside out as a player, curator, advocate, tastemaker, and guide. We're going to explore how those worlds interconnect. Welcome, Andee. It was a great seeing you last week in L.A. Where are you and how are you?
Yeah, it was really great seeing you. I am back at home. I live in Oregon on a farm, on a mountain in the woods, which was a long time coming. I lived in San Francisco for 33 years, and then given the opportunity to leave the city, I took it, and now I enjoy living up here with deer and turkeys and bears and all that stuff. And I'm doing well. Just as I mentioned before, relaxing a little bit before I leave on another tour on Wednesday. A brief break in what is turning out to be a very busy year.
Well, appreciate you taking time for this. So I want to start way back in your early life. You've been playing drums since you were 9 years old. What pulled you into music so deeply, and who were you listening to growing up?
My family was never really that into music, so I'm not actually sure where the music bug came from. And I did start playing drums when I was 9, and I took lessons, but I didn't like lessons, and so I think I stopped. And then when I was a little bit older, I was listening to a lot of stuff on the radio, but I'm 56, and so I don't know what this does for my credibility, but my timing aligns with sort of the 80s and 80s metal. So when I was a teenager, I was really into 80s metal, and that is kind of how I learned how to play drums. Is I enjoyed playing drums, so I just learned how to play all of my favorite records, and that's really kind of how I learned how to play the drums. And then I think very quickly I developed a voracious appetite for all kinds of music. I grew up in San Diego, where we had this amazing record store called Lou's, and I would just go there and buy any record that looked interesting, that had a weird cover, and I still do that today. That, to me, that's the best way to discover music. That looks completely strange. It must sound completely strange as well. By my 20s, I had become very sort of genre agnostic. I was an early proponent of no guilty pleasures, and you like what you like, and you could be a metal guy and love some pop music, and vice versa. And by the time I had my store, it was one of the best parts of the store was having some really academic person come in and get them to buy something super fun and goofy, or a metal guy to come in and get them to buy electronic music, and really sort of expand people's horizons.
Tell me about Aquarius Records. You opened that in the Bay Area. You ran it for more than 2 decades. What kind of made the store special, and what made you devote your life to the store?
So the store actually opened in 1969 or 70, depending on who you believe. I was in San Diego. I wanted to go someplace that had more going on. So I moved to San Francisco, started playing music. I was working in a bagel shop, and then across the street from the bagel shop was this store called Aquarius, and I would go in there every single day, buy records, talk to the people there, and I think I was just finally so annoying that they hired me. It was already kind of a cool countercultural store. Like, there's a lot of I don't know if you know the band The Residents, big eyeball heads. They were a big part of the store. They designed some of the displays in the window. A lot of famous San Francisco bands met via the bulletin board in the back of Aquarius. So it was very much already kind of a touchstone for the scene. And that really sort of helped me grow and develop a really open-minded approach to music and love of music. I always talk about how the two genres I hated country and I hated reggae. I just hadn't heard the right reggae or the right country. And then very quickly I fell in love with dub music, and I found that I loved outlaw country and classic country. And of course, you're not going to love everything, but Aquarius really helped sort of foster that. And when we took over the store, my partner Alan and I took over, we kind of pushed that even further, and we became, over the years, we were one of the only sources in the US for music from Finland and from New Zealand, and we became really excited about these sort of small scenes in different places that were really hard to access. And a lot of this was very early on, not quite pre-internet, but very close. We were one of the first stores that had a mailing list and did mail order, and that was all due to Wendy, who was the original the owner before us. And that list grew into something relatively well known. This list that I spent 20 years working on, where I think I wrote, I want to say 20 or 30,000 reviews of records.
That was the AQ list, right?
Yeah, and Alan and I have been working on a book for, the store closed in 2015, I think, and we've been wanting to compile a book of not all the reviews because they wouldn't fit, but maybe 10, 15,000 of our favorite reviews. And we both work at Pandora, and we both have very little time, so we haven't really made a lot of progress on the book. But yeah, it was a really special place to me. It was really, having grown up playing in bands and touring, sort of the punk rock thing. Aquarius was very much this hub for music and music lovers and music nerds. And a big part of touring is you get to a new city, and the first thing you do is you find the cool record store, because they're going to know what's up and where to go and where to eat and everything. And that became kind of Aquarius's MO. I was always tickled by people who would fly to San Francisco and show up at Aquarius with their suitcases, like before they even got to their hotel. They'd be like, "We've got to check out Aquarius," and then they'd always be so disappointed because it was half the size they imagined it to be, because it was this tiny hole in the wall.
Wow. So tell me, what is listening to 30,000 recordings over the years do to your ears, your taste, your emotional connection to music?
And the irony is that that's how I got my job at Pandora too. My first job at Pandora,
I bet,
was essentially listening to demos all day, every day. I don't know. I found that to be really pleasing. I will say it became a struggle at some point, where we put a list out every Friday. And so Friday night we'd work till 4 a.m. trying to get it done. And I don't think writing was what I did. So it was really challenging to creatively review that many things, but I don't think I got sick of it. I really continue to have a super voracious appetite. And there's a lot of quirkiness about my approach, where like, I would say, "This is my favorite record of all time." And someone would say, "You just said that about this record." And I'm like, "Yeah, but this one is too." And lots of hyperbole, lots of run-on sentences, lots of made-up adjectives.
That was your style.
Yeah. My coworker was a much better writer, and he used to always scold me. And there was a really famous, I'm going to forget his name, a Japanese author who he wrote The Stone Raft and Blindness. But anyway, he would write with no punctuation and no paragraph breaks. So I would always try to refer to a real author to demonstrate that my style wasn't unprecedented.
Well, I mean, the AQ list has a small A and a big Q.
Exactly. That was
your record label. Tumult has a small T and a small T at the end. So tell me about the record label. When did you start it, and what were you going for with the label?
The label honestly was an offshoot of the store. I mean, I will tell you that there was a band that I was obsessed with, who I've continued to be obsessed with. They're currently having a resurgence as well. This band from Chicago called Sold American, who played this really weird kind of disembodied, stoned kind of slow motion country. Ironic considering what I just said about country. But they were the band that prompted me to start the label. They had released records in Europe, and they had been on Rough Trade in America briefly, but no one had noticed or cared. And so the very first thing I put out was this quadruple record of this band that nobody liked or nobody knew, which was kind of setting the bar for my label. But for me, it was like I wanted to own those records, so I almost spent all this money and did all this just so I could have those. Beyond that, I'm like, it was an extension of the store, like the beauty of sharing music and turning people on to new sounds. And
you helped launch early black metal releases in the U.S. too, right?
In the Bay Area, yeah, there was a really sort of blossoming scene here. And just because of the other store here, Amoeba Records, and our store, all the different genres have things in common. Like, I really like things that are mysterious and minimal, and
It's kind of there's also a spiritual dimension in the music for you, I bet.
yeah, and then there's definitely like a through line. Like, you know, you mentioned that I program metal and new age, and everyone's like, that's insane, but it's not insane to me, because like both of those musics have really unique sound palettes, and the people who make them are really dedicated and often really sort of
Authentic.
Yeah. And for me, I love music that is sort of, and so I'm very much a teetotaler, straight edge. You know, I've never done any illicit substances, but I love music that creates that vibe. And there's, you know, people joke that like everything I love sounds like it was made while they were on drugs, even though I don't do drugs. And is it because I never did drugs, so I'm trying to get that experience secondhand? But like the new age I like is very psychedelic and drony and almost ritualistic, and it influences some of the music I make as an artist. And then, you know, the black metal I like is often very similar, very drony and ritualistic and minimal, and kind of almost like trying to induce a higher consciousness through sound, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's one of the magic things about music is it's a unique language that can achieve that.
Agreed. And I, you know, I find that in all kinds of music. So I find that in dub, I find that in a lot of electronic music. I think it's really just, and I think that's fun for me, is sort of searching out those different musics that push all the right buttons for me. Maybe that's true of everyone, but maybe it's just that mine tend to be on the weirder side. I don't know.
So let's explore your life as a drummer and a musician. You're an incredible drummer. You're playing in several bands. What does drumming give you that curation writing or industry business work doesn't give you?
That's really interesting. I really think drumming is primal and physical, and also has a level of transcendentalism. Like, if you know, you can reach sort of a fugue state playing drums, which is sort of, I always prided myself on being, and obviously I'm playing rock and punk and whatever, um but I always prided myself on being like the loudest drummer, the hardest hitting drummer, the weirdest parts, the like I really strove to be unique in my style and my approach. And a lot of that was just to create something special, not just for the music but also for me. But like the band you mentioned, P.E.E., which is having its resurgence now, like when I joined that band, they were not nearly as weird and mathy, and a lot of that was my personal baggage that I brought with me to that band. So I do find it very cathartic, and I love bands with unique drummers. Part of my love, if you really want to get in the weeds, part of my love for black metal is that it tends to be created by one person. That one person tends to generally not be good at drums, because drums tend to be a lot of the time the hardest thing to master. So you'll see a lot of bands where one person does everything and then they get their friend to play drums. But I love this whole world of unique drumming born out of wanting to do it yourself, even if you're not a good drummer. So it creates the most original drum parts and the most uniquely strange drum parts, which really appeals to me. Like, I love technical drumming and I love technical perfection in music, but I think more I love passion. And there was a band that from San Francisco that I used to love, and the drummer is now in a band called Deerhoof, who are relatively popular, but he was this drummer who was so, it seemed like he was always playing at the very edge of his ability. Like, at any minute the song could collapse and the whole band could just stumble to a stop, and it never did. And for me, that was incredibly exciting to watch. Like, more so than like a pro drummer who's like, oh, I've done this a billion times. Just watching somebody push so hard and try weird things and improvise, knowing that everything could go wrong and just praying that it doesn't. I really find that kind of approach appealing, and not just in drumming, but because I'm a drummer, especially in drumming. And I think that's true. Again, in black metal, that's very much true. A lot of the music has some people would consider laughably bad drumming, but I find that inspiring as much as I find, like, watching some professional session musician play perfectly. I find that really, maybe I think I value originality and passion and creativity more than technical chops. I
Yeah,
think.
when I listen to your playing in P, you're like a unit player. You're driving the unit. Everybody's tight on, kind of like melodic in a way.
Well,
You're
yeah,
all on the same melody line, and pushing out the song.
the rhythm section is sort of the thing, but in that band, my attention is exclusively almost on the guitar player. So the
Yeah,
drums and the guitars are locked in. The bass, obviously, I still listen to bass, but for me, that was a unique experience, and I think that grew out of my other band, my big band from the '90s, which was called A Minor Forest, and I never sent you that, but we had we were three-piece. We had a very weird, unique lineup where the drums were in the front of the stage facing the back, so the audience would be seeing my back and seeing the whole kit, which I always thought was really interesting for an audience. But it was also because we were very improvisational, and so in addition to drumming, I was also kind of a conductor. So every time we played songs, they were different lengths, and there were different pauses, and there were different things happening, and we were sort of, and then there's the idea that when you play together in a practice room, you're all facing each other. So it's weird to be on stage all facing the same way. So we sort of just moved that to the stage. And I also just, again, thought it was interesting for people to see what happens behind the drum kit instead of just seeing some guy make funny faces while he gets all sweaty. They can actually see, like, the pedals and it just seemed much more interesting visually too, to me.
you guys recently played 2 sold-out dates in LA. You're experiencing a resurgence. When older music like this suddenly finds a new audience, do you hear it differently yourself? Are you reinventing it, or you're just replicating it?
It's still a little bit different because I grew up kind of a punk rock guy. I was very sensitive to all the things you get sensitive to as a punk rocker, like selling out and, oh, you're too old to do this, and then, when I was younger playing music, once you were done being a band, you were done. And it's really interesting now that we're in this age of, I can't even think of a band that I liked when I was younger that hasn't reunited or made a new record, or I no longer have that same feeling because I've seen a lot of these bands I loved as a kid, and the experience was different and the bands were different. And in a lot of cases, they were better. When A Minor Forest reunited in 2014, I don't think we had the same youthful vigor, but we definitely were better. And, like, we were better musicians, and the sound, and we played better. And I almost feel the same way as same things happening with P. We're playing 30-year-old songs, and maybe the singers don't have the same range, and maybe I get tired quicker. But I think technically it's fun to sort of reimagine them and play them now. I do also appreciate just the fact that we have this endless storehouse of music, and music doesn't have to be. I was always very sorry, I jump around a lot. I think
It's all right.
I used to be really anti-release date. To me, you discover a record that's 20 years old today, that's as valuable to you as the person who discovered it 20 years ago when it came out. Like, it's all about the personal experience with music. And Alan and I used to have big fights when we would do year-end lists, because I'd be like, well, this record's from 10 years ago, but I heard it this year for the first time. And he's like, it doesn't matter. It has to be this year. And we'd fight about that a lot. But I do think it's really amazing. And this, the show you mentioned at Bottom of the Hill, which was sold out, was 50% kids who weren't even alive when we were a band. And I think that's really exciting, and watching this whole new crop of kids get to discover music that, I mean, to be fair, I 100% don't know how it happened. It just sort of happened. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful seeing a bunch of people my age, like kind of like an old band family reunion, and then a bunch of kids just jumping around and singing along and going crazy for music, which I love. And I love seeing kids at a show, like, not on Instagram or TikTok, at a show, really, like, immersing themselves in music and becoming fans, even if they're becoming fans of a band where everybody's older than their parents, but I still think it's cool and really unique and special, and I'm kind of loving it.
You guys put out a release a little while ago, didn't you?
We've just been reissuing. We the whole thing was born of it was the 30th anniversary of our debut record, and we were like, oh, it'd be fun to play a show maybe and make the record available again. But before we even got to that sort of groundswell of weird, whatever, our TikTok moment started happening, and then it became urgent because all these people were like, where do I get this record? I want to see you play. So we started working on some new music just because we're all friends, and beyond just the playing, I think for me personally, it's nice to reconnect with people I love, who I spent a lot of time with, creating the stuff that I think is still special to me. So from a very personal standpoint, it's fun anyway. But yeah, it's become this thing where we're going to LA on Wednesday, and then back up to the Bay Area, and all three of those shows are sold out, and it's an interesting experience because we weren't that popular when we were a band the first time around, so it's fun.
How cool is that?
It's super fun.
Yeah. So you moved from your beloved indie record store into a senior role at Pandora. It makes a lot of sense, a guy who's curating great music and review tens of thousands of albums, that you would take on that role. How did that make sense to you inside yourself? Here I am at Pandora doing this.
Honestly, it was really challenging because I was not a streaming person, and I'm still not. I mean, I work in streaming. I recognize that's how most people listen, but I don't know if you can see, like, I have a house full of record. I can't move my computer, but I have a house full of records. I have an iPod full of actual music that's downloaded, not just connected to streaming service. So when I first started working at Pandora, Aquarius was still open. Alan and I just were getting frustrated by being broke and not being able to afford to live in San Francisco. So I was the first one to take the leap, and I got a job at Pandora, and we kept it a secret because we were worried, sort of what I spoke to before, we were a little bit worried that Aquarius customers would not be pleased, because I think streaming was still maybe considered the enemy of the record store, So for 2 years, I worked 5 days a week at Pandora, and then on the weekends, I worked at Aquarius, and we kept it a secret until the store couldn't sustain itself anymore. And then eventually I helped Alan get a job. So my partner at Aquarius now works with me at Pandora, which is great.
It's awesome.
But yeah, in the old days, you like band people typically worked in record stores because you're like, I'm obsessed with music. But if you work in a record store for years and years and years, you have this very specific knowledge that I think is only applicable in certain places in certain ways. So I think in the old days, you would often become an A&R person, and that paradigm doesn't really exist anymore. And so I think a lot of record store people end up at DSPs or places like that. And similarly, a friend of mine worked at Pandora, and it's too complicated to go into, but something changed, and suddenly instead of getting 100 submissions a week, they were getting 1,000 or more. And so they needed someone to go through all these submissions. And they were like, who on earth would want to sit here and listen to like 1,000 submissions a month? And my friend was like, Andee would. So for the first 3 years, that's all I did at Pandora was listen to submissions all day, every day, which was
incredible.
Which was similar to what I did at Aquarius. And I got the same joy out of it, just sort of hearing new music, exploring, looking for diamonds in the rough. Like that's something I've always loved and I still love. So
when you got there, there was no Pandora AMP. That's something that developed when you were there. Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, to be honest, I think Pandora was always, amidst all the DSPs, Pandora was very DIY. Like Tim, who started Pandora, was like in bands. Like he played music, he went on tour. The whole idea behind Pandora was they wanted to replicate electronically the friendly record store employee. The whole recommendation thing was he wanted it to be like going into a store and running into me and me telling you like, oh, you like this band, you should love this band. And so that was sort of the impetus behind it. And I think that spirit stayed pretty strong in Pandora. So I think around 2014, a couple of the people that I would soon work with, realized they needed to like better serve creators. And that sort of became AMP. And when I first got to Pandora, I was just happy to have a job, and I enjoyed listening to demos and stuff. But I think I didn't really connect with the job and the purpose of being until maybe like 2 or 3 years in. Everything shifted. I became the manager. Our team became less about curation and more about creators. And that really resonated with me because, at the root of everything, running a record label, running a record store, like, it's all about helping artists and helping get music heard and discovering a record that blows your mind and doing everything you can to get more people to hear it. And we got lucky, and we sort of were able to position ourselves at Pandora where that's what we do now. We created these tools, and we keep improving them, and it's all about helping artists do what they do and do it better. And
so give me a little sense. Give me a little sense of these tools. I know what they are because I've attended your monthly seminars maybe a dozen times to learn from you guys. But what do the Pandora AMP tools do for an artist, and why should they be using them?
Obviously, I work at Pandora, and so I'm promoting Pandora. My approach, though, as I mentioned to you, I think when we had dinner, was that, like, I think that's a little disingenuous to just be like, Pandora. Like, I play in bands, I tour, I've done all this stuff. So my approach is a lot more holistic. So we, of course, focus and share these tools, which I think are probably the best of all the DSPs. But at the same time, I also help artists. Where should they make t-shirts? How do they get records pressed? How do you find a booking agent for touring? How do you get your music on Bandcamp? Like, all of that stuff to me is part of the whole. So we definitely sort of approach it that way, where, like, nothing is off limits in terms of, like, ask me anything. Do you have a question about Spotify? I don't work there, but I deal with them, so maybe I can help you, et cetera, et cetera. I do think the Pandora tools have gotten to a point where they are super awesome. The two sort of fundamental ones that we talk about the most, one is called featured tracks, and that allows you to really, it sounds so simplistic, but it's really awesome. You just basically push a button, select a song, and boom, you sort of boost spins. There's another algorithm, there's some machinations going on in the background, but it can be really powerful. It can be 1,000 spins extra, 100 spins extra, 1,000,000 spins. It sort of just depends. And then the other thing to me that is the most compelling is sort of the voice component. And we allow artists to make these artist audio messages where you can speak to your fans in your own voice. You can attach intros to songs. You can create programs of your music and other people's music and talk about why that music is meaningful to you. You can share. I mean, those are my favorite tools because you can be really creative. You can be like, here's what we listen to in the van on tour. Here's what we, here's all the songs that influenced me as an artist. Like, it really gives you this opportunity to share more about yourself. And it's so different than when I was young. When I was a kid and I was, like, obsessed with Kiss, I would write a letter to, like, the address on the back of the record, and maybe I would get, like, a form letter or something back, or you could join a fan club. It's so different now that you can legitimately personally connect with almost any artist, like, up to a certain level. Like, you can just find an artist you love and just email them and start a conversation. That to me is so powerful. And so I love the idea of incorporating that into the tools. And to be fair, AMP actually originally, and maybe still technically, is, stands for Artist Marketing Platform. Marketing is kind of generally a dirty word for artists. Like, marketing is gross. And I'm the same way. Like, I hate telling people to buy did you buy my record? Did you buy my record? So a lot of this is a way to create something special and unique to share with your fans and listeners. The buy my record thing is implicit, but it's less crass. And you can be like, instead of telling you to buy my record, I can be like, hey, I made this awesome mix of all the songs I've been listening to this month that I'm obsessed with, and I want to share it with you. And it becomes just this gift from an artist to a fan. And again, it's implied that you're like, oh, I forgot, Andee has a new record, I should buy that record. And it's a way to promote almost without promoting. I really do think at the end of the day, and I know this is limited, but like real music fans who love music, they want to support the artists they love. They really do. And so a lot of what we do is just figuring out ways to give people more opportunities to do that and being creative with ways to, like I will always buy, if there's a band I love, I will always buy their record. I will always buy their shirt. If they have some weird thing that I'll buy it. Like I want to give my money to the bands I love because I want those bands to keep making music that I love. And so for me, it's really just about that, like really figuring out ways to be creative so that people can support the bands they love.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I love about AMP is you can promote a song for 2 months at a time. You can get 6 songs throughout the year promoted. Like you said, you can add your own voice to introduce a track or just to introduce yourself. And it's really the only platform of its kind that helps artists connect with their fans in that intimate kind of way.
I mean, I think so too. And, and it's all free. We've gotten a lot of pressure to start charging for it. I personally don't think makes sense, but obviously, big companies, bottom line is always like, what can we get for that? I'm really of the mind that having these world-class tools and giving them away engenders so much goodwill that I don't think you could charge enough to make it worth changing, if that makes any sense, And I think this, I mentioned this too when we were together, having this weird thing with P and trying to like figure out Spotify and how our music got on. Like I've been running around like crazy trying to figure out all the same stuff that the people I help are trying to figure out. And the thing that becomes apparent is I rarely am able to speak to a real human being and get real answers and have a conversation. And it's been that way for a long time and it drives me crazy. And so a big part of what we do is simply that. When we do webinars, like I give everybody in the webinar my phone number, my actual email, my phone number. Same when we're at a conference. Like I want people to not just feel stuck and then be resolved to be stuck forever. I want them to be like, well, let's work together and try to get you to where you need to be. And that's so important to me in this sort of age of everything's faceless and you're sending emails to AI. And I think it's really important. So everyone on my team is out there in the world at conferences, at, shows. Like you will never, at least with my team, you'll never run into a problem and not be able to at least talk to me or someone on the team and troubleshoot it with a real human being. And that to me is so valuable considering how hard it is to, my Instagram account got suspended. I don't know what to do or who to talk to or how to fix it. But imagine if you could just email somebody like you or me and talk about it and figure it out together. Like that to me is really, really special.
Well, I'll put a link to Pandora AMP in the podcast description. I really encourage people to sign up for Pandora AMP. If you don't know what it is or how it works, go to the monthly seminars and just connect with Andee and Michelle and several other members of the team who join that call. It'll help you immensely. Let me ask you a question about algorithms and like what do artists most often misunderstand about how discovery and algorithms really work?
That's a good question. I think I will tell you sort of a little bit of a tangent. The what I think is the most misunderstood thing about DSPs and how streaming works is that when in the old days, if your song got played on Friday at 5 p.m. on KLOS in Los Angeles on the radio, 5 million people heard that song. That one play, 5 million people heard that song. Similarly, 5 p.m. on a Friday on Pandora or Spotify or whatever, your song gets streamed, that plays to one person. So I think that really, I like to just call that out, when we're really supposed to talk about this stuff, but because we did get ourselves, I think it's really strange that music ended up where it is and the valuation of songs and spins and what artists' creations are worth. It's a very strange place to be. I don't think it's the perfect place. So I'm doing what I can to help artists. That's important to me. I would love to get back to a place where, even back in the day, I always thought it'd be really fun if I was a millionaire or a billionaire to start a record label where we put out records the records were free. We just gave them to everyone, and we paid the band a ton of money. Like you eliminated the selling part and just we're like promoting the music like crazy because you have all this money and making sure the band is getting enough to keep making music. I love that idea, and I love the idea of artists just being able to be artists. And I know we're in this, with streaming and however royalties work, it's very challenging. So,
I mean, to make money as an artist, you've got to have people listening to you, on the various platforms, and you need to do what you need to do to put out music that appeals to people and finds an audience.
Well, yeah, and and to a degree, historically, radio has always been promotional. Like most artists didn't make their living getting played on the radio. They made their living because someone discovered them on the radio and then went to shows and bought their records and bought their t-shirts. And I think that's still the case, especially with streaming. Like the bands that make a living on streaming, there are some, but they're few, and you have to get really lucky. But I think if you approach it like, oh, I love that all these, we got thousands of people listening to our music on streaming. I think part of the goal is to how to translate that into, oh, we love that you're streaming our music, but can you also come see us play when we're in your town and buy a record? And I think that's sort of the elusive sort of magic bullet. In terms of the algorithms, I feel like when I first started exploring streaming, the algorithms were terrible. Like you would get a live song and it would be like, and you like it, and it would give you more live music, and you're like, no, I don't want I like that band. It's gotten so much more nuanced and so much better. And it's not because I work at Pandora, but Pandora is really probably for me the best discovery. Like we have a huge team of humans, and we have the Music Genome Project, which is exclusive to Pandora, where every song gets broken down into, I can't remember, like 400 or 500 parts. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it minor key? Is it major key? What are the time signatures? The lyrics? Are the vocals nasal? Are they raspy? Every single little bit. And all of those go into the algorithm, as well as like listener behavior. So like with me, like, did I skip that song? Did I thumb it up? Did I save it? There's all of that gets combined, and the algorithm becomes this really powerful tool. And I think on Pandora, at least, we've always been about discovery. Like that's the magic. Like, sure, you can hear Drake, you can hear Rihanna, you can hear all this stuff, but like for smaller bands being recommended by this algorithm, it's all about discovery. And if you look in AMP, there's actually this part of AMP that lets you, if you're an artist, lets you hone in on any song, see who's listening, how they're listening, where they heard it, what other artist stations are playing it, all this incredibly granular and actionable data. Like, oh, for a band like mine, I look and see, oh my gosh, this band station has been playing our music like crazy. That's awesome. But it gives me like, oh, they're in LA, we're going to be in LA. Maybe we should play a show together because obviously something's resonating, or maybe we should make a record together, or maybe I should ask them to sing on my new song. And there's just so much you can do that ties sort of back into my obsession with, this is all about community and this is all about connection. So it's not just being like, oh, that's cool, but it's like, that's cool, and now I can connect with another artist and create another sort of connection in this ever expanding community of music and musicians that I love and care about, which I think is really important.
And it's about authenticity. I think it's authenticity that helps artists connect with their audience.
Agreed. I do. Because a lot of people are really interested in success, which there's nothing wrong with that. Instead of just making the music that they hear in their hearts or their heads, they're like, so I'm working on a new song. How long should it be? And I'm like, well, it should be as long as you want it to be. Like, I'm in two bands. One, all of our songs are like 15 minutes long, which is the worst for streaming. And then P.E.E, all of our songs are less than a minute long, which is also the worst for streaming. So you're asking the wrong guy, or the right guy, because I'm like, a song, you're a musician, you make a song, it's done when it's done, when it feels right. So to me, it's super disingenuous to be like, well, most of the popular songs are 3 minutes and 42 seconds, so that's what I should aim for. Like, again, if your sole goal is just success, then yeah, sure, maybe you want to like line everything up as best you can. But for me, making music is not about that. It's about the act of making music, and a lot of too what I preach is sort of determining what success means to you, you know, as an artist. Like when I was 20, I wanted to be a rock star, and I went on tour for 10 months a year, and I slept in vans, and I wanted to be on. I'm 56 now. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be able to make records and go on tour once in a while, and I can. And so for me, I'm honed in on what success means to me at 56, where I am with the music that I'm making. That can go a long way to keeping you from becoming disillusioned with what is already a challenging environment, the music industry, to navigate on the best of days. So you really have to have a lot of self-awareness and understand what you want and need out of the experience of making music to not get burnt out or quit or be miserable, you know, like, because I think music making, even people who make really sour, horrible, gut-wrenching music creation is joyous, even that, when it's cathartic. Like, and I don't want anyone to have to like lose the joy of creation when they're making music just to like reach for the golden ring, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I started out with 0 listeners in 2010, and you just got to keep going. It's now 16 years later. You know, I have maybe 57,000 monthly listeners on Pandora.
I mean, to me, that's amazing.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I give a lot of credit to the tools, connecting with you guys, getting on your radar. And then again, I had to put out music that would better connect. And I started to figure out, what does my audience want to hear?
Mm-hmm.
And is that authentic for me?
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, putting that energy into being creative instead of trying to figure out what might become popular, I think that energy is better spent being creative. Well, I think 2 things. I do think music will find the right ears. Like it might take a while. It might be not as many ears as you wanted, but people who love music are looking for music and want to hear music, and they'll find the music they want to love. And so that connection will happen.
You know, I'll add to that is it's also the power of the catalog you have.
For sure.
That if you're putting out a lot of music, there are a lot of choices for people, and that catalog just keeps streaming, and the algorithm keeps popping people around the catalog.
Oh, and I did think of the other one. I do think people can tell, like, when music is disingenuous. Like, I think music made with heart and soul, you can tell, you can feel it. It resonates with people. I tell this story where a long time ago, I played in this kind of like poppy punk band from the Bay Area. And the main guy in the band was super well read. He was obsessed with anarchism, politics. He was really obsessed with 80s industrial and experimental music. But at the end of the day, the music he made was really catchy, poppy punk rock. And to me, that was always special to me, because I don't know, it seemed to me that he was making the music that he heard in his head, because it was so different than the bulk of his interests. And all he did was, like, he'd put out this pop punk single, but in the sleeve, he'd put a reading list, and the reading list would be full of all these books about anarchy and politics. And I love that he was just, I mean, I don't know if that's just me, but he was making this music that was seemingly so at odds with his interests and his politics, that for me, that had to be the music that he was meant to make. And I love that he did, and he dedicated his life to making this music that people loved. But at the same time, he like snuck in some, like, reading lists and some references to, politics. I thought that was really cool, and it made what he did and what he was so much more genuine for me, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. You're playing with a couple of bands. You're playing with P.E.E. Who else are you playing with these days?
Yeah, P.E.E. was like my band in the 90s, and we hadn't played in years and years and years. So that's sort of the band that's having this weird TikTok resurgence. I'm not questioning it anymore. I'm just kind of enjoying it and taking advantage of it. My 2 main bands right now, I play in a band with a friend of mine who lives in Berlin, and that band's called Common Eider, King Eider. We play very similar. It's very tangential to New Age. It's very ritualistic. It's very much like the singing is very monk-like. It's very minimal. We just finished a new record that's all gongs and vocals, and it's very it's actually the imagined soundtrack to a Finnish movie from I think the 50s called The White Reindeer. But what we play is very sort of, I think, ritualistic and new age adjacent. And then my newer band we have is called My Heart and Inverted Flame. And we are a band that's just drums and synthesizers, no guitars, no bass, no nothing. Very cinematic and psychedelic. And we have a new record coming out in May. So yeah, so right now 3 apparently full-time bands.
Is there a website link for you as an artist?
I think we tend to use, this is the other funny thing, is I think we tend to use Bandcamp for my various bands just because it's very easy to navigate. It's very DIY. It offers streaming. It offers physical fulfillment. So it's kind of an easy hub. I mean, I can share with you. I have a Facebook and Instagram for all my things.
Yeah, send me some of that stuff and I'll put that in the description. My thanks to Andee Connors for joining me today. You can learn more about Pandora AMP at amp.pandora.com, and I'll include a link in the podcast description. If this episode moved you, please like, follow, and share Shambhu Sessions wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Shambhu, and until next time, stay open, stay inspired, and keep listening.